Welcome people of all ages, shapes, and colors to another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. This is one of your co-hosts, TV, aka TV on basketball, alongside my other co-host, Jay, aka the Knockdown. Jay, how's it going, my guy?
It's going good, man. We coming down the stretch and we're talking Western Conference today. Our podcast is not safe, TV.
Oh man, it was already weird doing the Western Conference because literally the Western Conference standings are changing on the daily. So having these top six, I mean, it could just change in a flash. So that's how crazy the Western Conference is right now. But that's what we love about the NBA. Everything is like changing constantly, having us to keep up with the NBA at all times. And that's what we're gonna be talking about today. It's gonna be another awesome episode. But before we start the basketball talk, we do have to plug our socials. Remember to follow our individual socials at the Knockdown J, at TV on Basketball. Individual links will be down in the description below. And in terms of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, TikTok, Instagram for the best daily NBA content. And if you're on any of the podcast networks, either on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, don't forget to subscribe or leave a review. That would be highly, highly appreciated. And if you're watching on YouTube, remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. Jay, are you ready to get in some basketball talk, man? The season is winding down. The playoffs are around the corner.
Yeah, man. TV. I mean, this is the conference that's the talk of the town right now. This is where all of the parity is really clicking at right now. And this is going to be the area when you talk about the NBA where we legitimately could come down to a photo finish, man, in terms of how those final eight shake out.
Yeah, 100%. And we're going to be talking about a team first that hasn't really been meeting those expectations. We're going to be talking about the Dallas Mavericks. Because currently right now, Jay, it just seemed like a couple weeks. It just seemed like February when we were talking on the pod. We were excited about the Kyrie Irving trade. They were fifth in the Western Conference. It looked all, rainbows and sunshine for the Dallas Mavericks. Right now they sit at 11th place, 37 and 39, not even in the play-in tournament. Jay, what's happening with Dallas?
Bro, the issue with Dallas is that the Luka magic isn't working. The Luka magic fairy dust is out of its powers, man. It's one of those things where we had the conversation a little bit before we started recording about the idea of like, let's look at the handful of teams that sit in a similar pocket as the Dallas Mavericks. And then from a talent perspective, where do they stack up between Luka Doncic and some of the guys that you would consider their best player in front of them? Now, I think that a lot of people will obviously still maybe make an argument when it comes to LeBron James for the Lakers, but I think that most people would say that Luka Doncic is better than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander right now. I think that a handful of people would definitely agree that Luka Doncic is better and at least a little bit more reliable, even with his recent injury history, in terms of being better than Zion Williamson. I think that the Luka versus Curry thing might be a legitimate debate from an offensive standpoint. I think once you get the defense, I think maybe you favor Curry a little, but some people may not even agree with that. And then I think that the same thing goes for the Timberwolves. I love Anthony Edwards. I'm glad that Cat is back, but I think that Luka Doncic is better than that group as well. So when you look at this idea, right? We talk about Luka Doncic as a generational talent. We pair him up with the Michael Jordans and the LeBron Jameses of the world when we talk about his overall impact as like a solo talent. And right now, I don't see it, TV. I don't see it. I know that everybody loves to try to plead for the lack of, I guess, the lack of fit when it comes to Kyrie Irving. Again, I think they're 3-8 in the time that they've both been on the floor together playing as a duo. I understand that Christian Wood hasn't been too great. I definitely know that the Dorian Finney-Smith thing hurt them defensively, but I don't want to slander Luka Doncic's name, TV, but I guess I'm going to pose the question to you when we talk about Dallas and their hopes for making the playoffs. Is Luka really that guy to carry a team dolo to the postseason when things aren't working out? Because it seems like when the team is formulated well around him, at least in terms of the defensive prowess, he can just backpack the whole thing. But when the defense is bad, it seems like he only further contributes to that, and the offense doesn't help balance it out.
That's the thing, though. I mean, that's the thing. Like when you have a generational superstar like a Luka Doncic, that's the way you have to build your team, where you know the offense revolves around him. He is literally like the soul. He's the one who controls everything. So what you need other guys to do around him, like Dallas has done in the last couple of years, is fill out the gaps. Whether it's defensively, in terms of the perimeter, getting like the interior guys and people who can hit shots. Now they looked at this season, especially at the trade deadline. They were like, you know what? We can't rely on Luka all to create everything for us. So how are we supposed to get that second ball handler, that second guy for Luka Doncic? They have a lot of holes in their team like pre-trade deadline. So in order to get someone like they did in the Kyrie Irving, something is gonna have to be sacrificed. And what was sacrificed? It was the defense. I mean, they weren't that great beforehand, but giving away Dorian Finney-Smith, their most valuable defender on that team, is gonna make a difference. And it has made a massive difference because yes, Kyrie Irving is here. Yes, in the 16 games he's played, he's still averaging like 26 points a game, 5-5. He's doing his thing. But when the Mavericks are giving it all back on the other end, it doesn't matter. We talked about this like even like around the trade deadline. I mean, all the Mavericks have to do is keep it close, and they have two of the best fourth quarter scorers to take them home. They've been in close games, but their defense has been so bad that they can't even get to that point where they're like, okay, we need a final shot or like a last couple of possessions to close it out, because they can't close it out. They can't be able to they're not able to defend anyone on the perimeter or even on the inside. And I don't want to put like all the blame and I don't want to say I want to put all the blame, but I don't want to like put too much pressure on players like a Josh Green, like a Jaden Hardy, who had to step up massively, like in the minutes of like Spencer Dinwiddie and also Dorian Finney-Smith. But these are guys who weren't getting as much minutes already beforehand, and now you're kind of inserting them into like these like big roles, saying we need to make the playoffs or it's a bust type of situation. And these are super young players. You're putting them under a lot of pressure. Josh, I mean, you mentioned it beforehand. Let's think it was like what, the Zach Lowe podcast where he mentioned how Josh Green is probably their second most important player next to Luka just because of the defensive impact he has.
Yeah,
that's not the way you want to build a team. And they're like the way that they're like running the team as well. And then this is a tribute to Jason Kidd. He's still running it like it's last year's team when they do not have the personnel. So it's a lot of things contributing to this. And I think also at the end of the day, Luka just looks like he's just not having that. Like you talk about Luka Magic not really like shining throughout the Mavericks. They look like there's just no Luka Magic inside himself right now. He does not look like himself. He's like moping a lot. Like he's one technical away from being suspended the game, like and stuff like that. So the Luka Magic, yes, it's not like there for the Dallas Mavericks, but it also doesn't look like it's in there for Luka Doncic. So I don't know. Like they committed to one side of the floor and they just don't. I just feel like they just don't know how to manage the guys that they have now because they're still trying to replicate the same system from last year.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue about that when you mention the idea of just running what they're doing last year is that the personnel is not set up for them to get away with using Luka with this extremely high usage, knowing that they have the defensive anchoring with guys like Dorian Finney-Smith, Maxi Kleber playing healthy and things of that nature to kind of back him up on the other end to help him kind of take possessions off on that side. They've kind of only doubled down on the high usage stuff, and it's kind of, I'm not even going to lie, Luka seems like he's not having nearly as much fun. But TV, I gotta be real with you. I don't think the rest of the team is having very much fun playing around that system either. Some of the notable things that I look at when I just look at the team stats is, number one, they're 29th in pace. So they're second, they're nearly dead last in pace of play. They're a really slow team. They're a team that pretty much plays through Luka Doncic dribbling the air out of the ball, right? This is the old James Harden tag that they used to say, right? That he would kind of just ISO for a possession and would take to the last 8 seconds for decisions to be made. Another thing is they don't create secondary opportunities for themselves. They're the worst rebounding team in the league, and more specifically, they are the worst offensive rebounding team in the league. So they're a team that plays slow and then doesn't create second chance opportunities for themselves when they get into shot clock or situations where they have to get a basket. And then the other thing to me that really kind of stood out more than anything is just the fact that they are a team that will live and die by the three despite having a guy in Kyrie Irving that is really solid in the mid-range area. They're dead last in 2-point attempts while being top 3 in 3-point attempts. That means they're living from beyond the arc. And right now, if we just kind of pull up the basic statistic for how guys are performing, there's not a ton of dudes that are hitting at a 40% clip or better on high volume that are also contributing on a night-to-night basis. Yeah, Reggie Bullock is hitting 38% of his threes on 5 attempts a night. The dude's averaging 7 points a game. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, these are guys that might be hitting when they really are playing well. But when they have off nights, like this is the Dallas Mavericks team where like when the supporting cast is bad, are horrible,
Yeah.
literally non-existent on the floor. My biggest worry about Dallas this season is the fact that I think they doubled down on stepping away from what got them to the dance. You know, that's the good old
Yeah.
phrase, team. You rock with what got you there, right? And I think that similar to how people joned on the Lakers, right? The Lakers win the championship built off the back of defense, right? And
Yeah.
then the next 2 years, they're like, let's get more ball handlers for LeBron James so that he can have more playmaking around him. And how did that go? They made the playoffs and got shellacked once, and the other times they didn't make the playoffs at all and still might be in fear of missing the postseason again this season,
Yeah.
right? Dallas makes the Western Conference Finals last season, comes to this season not willing to pay Jalen Brunson.
Yeah. That's the big
Comes into
one.
the season trying to go in an all-in move for Kyrie Irving, and you give up on your defensive acumen that brought you to the dance last year because they were surprisingly one of the better defensive teams in the league, despite the personnel not really saying they should have been.
Yeah. It's
Just saying, man, I don't understand what it is with some of these coaches where they see themselves so successful with one style and they completely divert away from what brought them to it. And the weird part about it is what you said with Jason Kidd is that technically he is going with what the dance is, what brought them to the dance last season. The issue for Dallas is wake up, bro. Y'all made 2 moves in a row that say you can't be that team anymore.
yeah. Well, the biggest like thing is, and I think we're gonna talk about their play style soon, but not paying Jalen Brunson was their biggest mistake.
The
Not paying,
biggest mistake that jump started this whole thing.
because we saw what he was capable of in the playoffs, especially in that first round series where he was an absolute bucket and just like a steady hand that the Mavericks needed that they could rely on, and they weren't willing to pay him. They just weren't, and I think like that was like the biggest thing that kind of snowballed the rest of this, because they went on to get Christian Wood to kind of fill out the points and stuff like that. But then they didn't have a reliable second ball handler next to Luka. So what did that mean? They had to go and get Kyrie Irving, which means they had to give up defensive personnel. And that's them not getting like keeping Jalen Brunson kind of snowballed this whole effect, and that kind of ruined their team from the inside out. But Jay, in terms of this like play style, we both talked about it. Like the way that they're playing right now, it's not working. And we talked about this before, like this episode. Should they go full Kings, like where it's all
That's
offense, like all offense, no like and like very little defense? I mean, the Kings are not as bad defensively, of course, but they're still like bottom 10 in the league. But they have a all-time great offensive rating, the best offensive rating in NBA history, and they're doing it they're basically winning a lot of their games through that. At this point, should Dallas do that? I mean, you have Kyrie Irving, you have Luka Doncic. For some reason, Jason Kidd doesn't want to play Christian Wood because he hurts the defense. Well, everyone out there is hurting your defense. Like, I don't think like putting in Christian Wood and giving him more minutes and like just adding like some more points on the board, it can't get much worse than what's happening right now. So, is that the way they should go about it? Is there like, because like honestly at this point it's live or die right now because they might not even make the play in.
So TV, I think the logic is there, right? The idea of playing a more up-tempo style that, because remember, one of the most notable things is that the Kings are one of the fastest teams in the NBA in terms of their pace of play too. It's the complete opposite. They're 11th, so granted, not in the top 10, but they're a team that definitely plays a lot more up-tempo. But TV, here's the difference. This is why I don't think they can go full Kings. I don't think it's that they don't have the opportunity to. I think their play style doesn't allow them to, with Luka being the kind of player he is. Now, if you think about it, Domantas Sabonis is a guy that is able to facilitate out of the post, very, very skilled passer that can create from the interior. De'Aaron Fox is a guy who creates most of his opportunities for others as well as for himself, playing downhill and utilizing his speed. Luka Doncic plays at the beat of his own drum, right? Kyrie Irving creates kind of within the flow of what he is able to do and what he's able to see up front as opposed to kind of seeing for others and creating for others.
Mhm.
But the other thing that's most notable, dude, is this team doesn't pass the rock. Like,
That too.
literally, the Kings are number 4 in assists per game as a team. Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks are second to last in assists per game. They don't pass the pill, bro. So
Yeah.
I think even if they wanted to play Kings level offensive basketball, I don't think that they have the mentality to switch from a Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving centered offense where you know those are your shot creators to now being willing to say, okay, we're going to get Christian Wood more involved. We're going to get Josh Green more involved. Maybe Jaden Hardy needs to play more because he gives an offensive pop. That's the issue. Is there a willingness to say, look, I understand we have 2 all-star caliber guys that can average 25 to 30 plus a night, but we got to get these other guys buckets if we want to win on a night-to-night basis. It's very simple. Let's just look at the point totals, right?
Yeah.
I guess if you include Tim Hardaway Jr., who has been relatively active, despite the fact that it feels like he's non-existent on this team,
Yeah.
Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving both are averaging 25 plus points per game. The next 2 guys behind him are Christian Wood at 16.9 and Tim Hardaway Jr. at 14. Let's go to the Sacramento Kings now. The Sacramento Kings are sharing the sugar for real. 19 for DeMontis, 25 for De'Aaron, 15 for Harrison, 11.9 for their rookie Keegan Murray, 15 for Kevin Huerter, 13 for Malik Monk.
Yeah.
There's much more distribution amongst their starting group and amongst their main 7 guys, main 5 to 7 guys, in which all of those guys also do something different so they don't interfere with how the offense flows. Now pair that with how fast they play, and you have a superior offensive group. On the flip side, you have 2 iso-centric offensive players for the Dallas Mavericks that play at a much slower beat, and you have a group around them where the only thing that they're able to really do at a high level is shoot the 3-ball offensively. Otherwise, they're just cones standing around Kyrie and Luka on offense.
Yeah.
They're built completely different, and that ends up hurting the play style if you were to try to replicate it. I don't think it's that they don't have the personnel. I think it's a mindset shift, bro. I think it's because I also think those other guys on Dallas probably could do more, but they've been pigeonholed so deep. I don't know if you can shake that this late in the game.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, when your top 2 guys are Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic, your offense really can go one way. And when you can't bring it on the defensive end, and if those guys are not producing the way they are, you're basically screwed. And that's what's happening with them right now. I mean, 20 games since the trade deadline has happened, they are 7-13.
Jeez.
7-13. Very, very ugly. It's tough for the Dallas Mavericks. And I hate to bring it back to this, but like when we were talking about title contenders, I know Jay was mentioning like that much potential. It's kind of rough right now, and this is again hurts the chances of them bringing back Kyrie in the offseason. So a lot can really go bad for Dallas from now till the offseason. So let's see if they're going to be able to bounce back. But man, it's not looking great. It is not looking great for them whatsoever. But going from the negative to the positive, let's look at the top of the West, man. Let's look at the top of the West. And like we did last week with the Eastern Conference, where we went through each of the top 6 teams and gave our X factor for each of them, we are going to be doing it now for the Western Conference. We have 6 teams here. As of today, we have the Denver Nuggets, Sacramento Kings, Memphis Grizzlies, Phoenix Suns, LA Clippers, and the Minnesota Timberwolves. And we're going to be giving you guys an X factor for each of those 6 teams and who we think is going to basically be like a deciding factor whether they're going to be able to go far in the playoffs or not. But Jay, I'm going to throw it over to you. We're going to start, you know what, let's start at number 6 and move our way down. Who is your biggest X factor for the Minnesota Timberwolves this coming playoffs?
This might be such a cheap play, bro, but I got to be honest, it is Cat. It really is Cat, man.
Yeah.
Because this team is just so different with him involved. Like this team, look, some people are trying to make this weird argument that like Like the team has been better without Karl Anthony Towns on the floor, and it's been an opportunity to be able to unlock Anthony Edwards. I do think there's some merit to that. I definitely do. Being able to put the ball in Anthony Edwards' hands that much more, I think that also kind of was influential on the D'Angelo Russell trade. If you notice, the main thing they went for was a more steady guy offensively by picking up a guy like Mike Conley. They
Mm-hmm.
made that transaction. It was the idea of getting a guy who's going to make right basketball decisions as opposed to relying on their self-creation. I think D'Angelo Russell is a better player and a better self-shot creator than Mike Conley. But I think Mike Conley is a better table setter
Yeah.
for a team. And that allows a young guy like Anthony Edwards to really blossom in a big-time way, especially when he's on ball, because you know a guy like Mike Conley off ball can really still be impactful. But Karl Anthony Towns is that rev, man. He's that gear that flips things over when you talk about what this team can do on an off on an at an offensive level. Like I think Anthony Edwards can be a lead scoring guard on a fringe like playoff perennial playoff team, right? A guy like I think
Yeah.
he can be that for a team. But I still have the belief, and maybe this is just false hope. Maybe it is. But I still have the belief that Karl Anthony Towns has the offensive prowess to still be a number one caliber player on a championship level team
Yeah.
when healthy. And like I said, maybe this is false hope. Maybe this is completely false hope. Maybe the defensive aspect of Karl Anthony Towns hurts him way too much. Maybe the offense and the lack of reliability from a health standpoint is too much of a hit. But I just think that he is way too skilled and way too talented to not still be considered as one of the top guys you would want to build your franchise around. Remember, that was that big thing that
Yeah.
happened 3 to 4 years in a row where the surveys kept saying, who's that one guy you would want to build a franchise around? And the name that kept coming up year after year after year is Karl Anthony Towns. You mean to tell me that just because of a situation involving some very tragic personal circumstances, as well as a really rough season injury-wise this year, that now all of a sudden we're going to discount that belief because we haven't seen him in a while? Remember what Kevin Durant made
Yeah.
us believe when that was the case, right? Some
Yeah.
things you got to just wait it out. And I think Karl Anthony Towns still falls into that category. I think people are still sleeping on the impact he can provide. And if he can come back and this team be in a playoff scenario again, we saw what they can do against some of the better teams in the league. They pushed Memphis hard. And if it weren't for some mental blunders, I think Memphis could have been up out of there. And that's crazy because many people were saying Memphis could have made the dang Western Conference Finals had they taken out the Golden State Warriors in round two.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, in terms of Karl Anthony Towns, he's definitely even become one of the most underrated players in the league. People forget
Easy.
how, like, people forget about his like offensive ability. One of the like the best shooting big men of all time, in my opinion, and also just one of the like more like gifted like offensive like big men that we've had in a while in this league. So like he definitely deserves more love. And I think because of like the weird mix between him and Anthony Edwards the last couple of years, the fact that his defense has been kind of exposed over the last couple of years has been kind of hurtful to his kind of reputation and stuff like that. But I still believe, yeah, I'm with you. He is like, he still has like top 15, top 10 player potential in this league, and that he, with the right opportunity, will still be able to show that. And I think if he's like if he's playing like the way he is right now, which has been good ever since he's come back from injury, we need to see more of that, and hopefully it can lead to more success in the playoffs. But you mentioned the Minnesota Timberwolves and their blunders last year about D'Angelo Russell and kind of their point guard rotation last year not being as like kind of like a steady hand. Well, my X factor is gonna be Mike Conley. My X factor, just because last year when you have a point guard rotation of D'Angelo Russell and Patrick Beverly, it's gonna be a little bit erratic. It's going to be like erratic with those two guys manning the point guard position. Now you have one of the most reliable guys there in Mike Conley, and not only is he like still solid defensively, he's going to be able to calm things down. You don't have to keep going to Anthony Edwards. You don't have to have the ball and D'Angelo Russell to create for himself at all times to Karl Anthony Towns. You have someone, like you said, one of the best table setters in the league, one of the best guys who could throw lobs, especially with Rudy Gobert on the court. They already have that connection from their time in Utah. You have him who's able to make sure everyone gets theirs. And when the time comes, you can still rely on him to hit a bucket when you need to. I mean, Mike Conley has hit some big shots in his career as well. I think that Mike Conley's like calming presence is gonna give the Memphis Timberwolves a whole kind of other, not identity, but whole other look compared to last year. And yes, last year their team was full of heart. They had all this energy about them, and this team a little bit different. But I think like someone with like Mike Conley, like having that sort of presence there at the point guard position, will make it so if they do face a team, which it looks like they're going to be facing up against the Sacramento Kings, a team who likes to move it up and down, up and down. He can push the ball, but also when it comes to half-court offense, you're still confident with the ball in his hands that he's going to be able to make the right decision every single time.
Yeah, man. And I think that's a point that I want to build off of, because I think that's a great point when you also talk about their positioning in the standings. If they go up against a team like the Sacramento Kings, there's a weird world where you could look at that series and you could point to some potential mimics from last season's series against the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, granted, the X factor is Domantas Sabonis in that case, right? When you look at him, that's in that series specifically. I'm not saying he's my X factor when we get to Sacramento, but what I'm saying is in a series like that, that's the difference between what happened against Memphis as opposed to what happens in a series against the Sacramento Kings. Is I think Domantas Sabonis is much more of an equalizer, where even if these two teams were to get significantly up tempo, I think his presence in the paint makes them much more dangerous, especially with the fact that I do see Rudy Gobert is still a top level defender in this league. Yeah. But I think Domas could really give him some work, and that's something that I don't think Memphis had, which is what made that series much closer than it had to be. Was I think they didn't have an interior presence to really challenge Cat, and I think the same thing goes in reverse this season. Yes, they have Rudy Gobert now, but I think Domas is good enough to give Rudy Gobert buckets night in and night out throughout an entire 7-game series. So they're shit out of luck again.
Yeah, so it just really like gives them like another kind of like element to their offense. I mean, I think we talked about in previous podcasts how or at least I talked about on the TikTok how like in the Clippers sense, Russell Westbrook kind of like changes their offense in the terms of them being able to like to speed up, especially being one of the slowest teams in the league. Conley gives them where you can kind of go both levels, where you can go fast, he's able to push the ball, but he can also slow things down in here, and you're able to trust him in those kind of late game situations, those half court situations, which the Timberwolves struggled with last year, but I think they have that element this year, even though if they don't have the same sort of energy that sort of energy that they brought from last season with a Patrick Beverley and D'Angelo Russell. But moving on to the Clippers, as we mentioned before, I'm going to go with them. Jay, who is your biggest X factor for this LA team?
Oh, man. So this is a big one because, like, the Clippers are the weirdest team in the league, TV, because we've had this conversation off camera before. We don't know what their rotation is gonna look like, gang. Like, let's really call it what it is. Let's really call a spade. Let's call it what it is. I really don't know what their rotation is gonna be. So, TV, maybe this is me copping a plea. Just rock with me for a second. Maybe I'm copping a plea. But the X factor is Ty Lue, gang. I'm gonna be real with you.
I got you,
dude. Ty Lue's ability to coach this team up under these conditions is going to be huge, especially because, look, he had to coach his tail off with Paul George last season with Kawhi Leonard out. It was Paul George leading the team in order for them to make that run in the postseason last year. This season, it could be the reverse where you have Kawhi Leonard available, but Paul George might miss a significant amount of time in the postseason, especially if they don't go the distance. So this could be a team that could really be going in undermanned, and they're missing their second best player. Just with that alone, he's going to have to coach his tail off. But then let's put it in perspective. Terrence Mann, are you playing point guard during the postseason? Or, like, where are we putting you? Eric Gordon, can you buy minutes just off of the fact that you're a burly body? Not sure. I think Norman Powell plays. I oddly think Nicholas Batum gets significant time. Does Rocco play in the postseason?
Where does Bones Highland fit into all this?
Where does Bones Highland fit into all this? These are the questions that, honestly, the LA Clippers are the biggest chemistry set in the entire NBA. And look, Ty Lue's going to have to be the scientist and put some work in it. He's going to be in the lab for a good amount of time because this team's going to make the postseason. That's for sure. That I feel relatively confident about, even with the injury that they have right now to Paul George. The question is, I think the question you have to ask yourself when it comes to the Clippers now is, are they safe against anybody?
You're right. You're right.
For real.
Yeah, the thing. That's the thing with like that's the thing about like having to make all these moves mid-season. And we talked about this when they made these moves. Like, it's a lot of things to kind of figure out when there's like only 20 something games left, and you have like so many like pieces that expect to play, who like deserve minutes and stuff like that, and you just don't have space. You only have 48 minutes in a ball game, like, and you have to play your best players a lot during the playoffs. So some guys are gonna miss out. Who's gonna have to figure it out? It has to be the freaking scientist himself, Ty Lue, in
Mm.
order for that to work. But you're talking about a chemistry set. We're gonna be like, my X factor is gonna be the one who's gonna be the most, what do I call it? Who can implode this team the most? I guess. Like, he's the one who's the biggest like explosive factor. It's gonna be Russell Westbrook. Like, is he gonna like? We talked about if Eric Gordon's gonna play, if Bones Highland's gonna play. Russell Westbrook could either be playing, in my opinion, 30 minutes a night for this team just because they need just like that extra offensive body when Paul George is missing, especially because you need like more like creating for others, or he might not play at all. This is the type of
TV, that's biting off a little bit more than you could chew, though.
okay, so maybe
I think the real question, and maybe you can answer this as part of your breakdown for Russ, though. I think the real question is, can you close games with Russ during the
yeah,
postseason?
fair. Okay, that's fair. I was just my thing is that like if you like hold Russell Westbrook to like 15 to 20 minutes a game, I don't know how that's gonna rock with Russ. I don't know how that's gonna rock with it, but I see what you mean. Who's gonna be that closing point guard? Can it be Russ? It could be. It just depends on what he's giving you on a 99 basis, and he's so erratic. This is what I'm talking about with him being the most like explosive kind of member of this like chemistry set. Like he can either like give you a bit of everything: the rebounds, the assists, the defensive effort, the scoring. He can give you all of that. But sometimes, man, this guy can shoot you out of a game. This guy can turn the ball over 5 to 7 times, and that could cost you like big time in like a third or fourth quarter. They've been looking for that solid point guard position for years, ever since Chris Paul has left. For
Oh,
years, and they've been like recycling through players like a John Wall, Reggie Jackson. Both those guys are gone. Now they have a three-man group here with Bones Highland, Eric Gordon, and at this point Russell Westbrook. Can Russell Westbrook stay on the court? And when they need him the most, especially like we mentioned, the Paul George injury, we don't know when he's going to come back. They say he might be back for the postseason, but we can never know for sure.
yeah.
Can Russell Westbrook provide enough that he's able to close games? Is he going to be able to be that second guy next to Kawhi Leonard, creating shots for himself and for others? I'm not sure, but if we can get the good version of Russell Westbrook, this Clippers team can really go far. But he could do that, but also like there could be some games where he only plays like 10, 15 minutes, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Which version of Russell Westbrook we're gonna get, and can he be relied on a game to game basis?
TV, can I side tangent real quick about the Clippers
Yes.
and ask you a question though? Because you
Yes.
mentioned the CP thing, and I think this is like a super interesting like thought experiment when it comes to the Clippers, right?
Yeah.
You look at what the Clippers do, right? Let's just contextualize who the Clippers are, a team at their best, right? This is a team that thrived best. I think it was probably 2 postseasons ago with their 5-out erratic all wing style that had guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George on the wings as the two of the best perimeter defenders in the league, right? Along with a bunch of guys who could just fly around, guard, play up tempo,
Yeah.
and it just seemed like the game came faster to the Clippers, right? Because everybody was able to fly around, shoot threes. Terrence Mann had himself one heck of a postseason to really put himself on the forefront of the NBA map, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why does this seem like you mentioned the point guard carousel that this team has dealt with over the last couple of seasons since CP? Is it crazy to believe that this team is almost better built for what CP is now than what the Phoenix Suns right around him now are built for him? This oddly looks like a team where you plop CP in with what he does now at a much more diminished state, and he actually provides exactly what the Clippers need, as opposed to for the Suns, his lack of offensive creation this season has been one of the biggest detriments to the Phoenix Suns because he's no longer hitting the mid-range and being that mid-range assassin that he's been for the last 2 to 3 seasons in particular, but of course for his entire career.
Yeah.
And now he's got his passing ability and his ability to create the up-tempo is kind of the only thing that's making him serviceable in Phoenix.
Yeah. I think like in terms of like this Clippers team like as constructed right now, I think they're able to like flesh out the good parts of Chris Paul more. I truly do believe that. And with like the situation they have right now, like switch out like Russell Westbrook for Chris Paul, I think they would be in a much more like safer, like they would be like in a lot more steady position, because literally for years, like whenever at least I talked about on my show about the need for the Clippers point guard, I was looking at kind of like poor man's versions of Chris Paul, whether it's like a Ricky Rubio, whether it's a Tyus Jones, like steady hands that are able to like just like really like calm things down. So having someone like Chris Paul definitely would be like a positive for the Clippers right now. But yeah, but I mean, yeah, of course that can't happen right now. But they just like haven't found that kind of like replacement for him. Like, even with like the guys they have right now, who is the table setter? Russell Westbrook is 100% like a very good like assist man, but also he is like compared to Chris Paul, he's very prone to turnovers. He is not someone that you can like say, okay, make the correct decision every time. Like you might get that 50-60% of the time with Russell Westbrook. So
Yeah.
it's something to look at if you're the Clippers, and that's why I have him as kind of the X factor, because if you can get good Russ, I think the Clippers still have a shot, especially if they can like hold on for a bit until Paul George comes back. But will that be the case? I don't know. And especially with like the potential matchup against the Phoenix Suns, that's gonna be pretty tough. That's gonna be a pretty tough matchup for that Clippers team, especially when they do not have Paul George on the court.
Mhm.
Speaking of the Phoenix Suns, though, and a potential match between them and the Clippers, they're up next year, sitting number 4 in the West. Kevin Durant returning tomorrow, by the way, as of recording, so that is some good news for Phoenix Suns fans. But Jay, in terms of the biggest X factor, who do you got over there in Phoenix?
Dude, this might sound so stupid considering they got like the best top four potentially in the Western Conference. So going left field might just seem like a waste of time. But dude, I think it's Josh Okogie. I think he's like their best perimeter
Interesting.
defender. I think he's like arguably their best perimeter defender. I think that he has given them so much energy in the time that he's been on the floor. He's not going to be a guy that's going to give you a ton of points. He's not going to score at a high clip. He's just a high energy, high effort guy. He's going to give you a big time play here and there. And one of the other things that's just big, like very notable about Josh Okogie is I think in a conference, right? In a conference dominated by the point guard position, right? This is the flip side. The Eastern
Yeah,
Conference, they got all the bigs,
yeah,
all the bigs. But in the West, it's guards galore, man. And I
yeah,
think the biggest thing that's notable about that for the Western Conference is that you got to be able to have guys that can go out on the perimeter and guard. And I'm not saying they got to be 94 feet demons, but you have to have guys that are going to give Steph Curry's, that are gonna give Russell Westbrooks, that are gonna give Terrence Manns, even guys like Kawhi Leonard and dudes like that play on those wings. You gotta have dudes that are gonna come out and compete defensively, play at a high level, and they gotta be able to guard up and down the lineup. Josh Okogie could probably guard 1 through 3 with his burly physicality, and they're gonna need that, bro, because this
yeah,
entire Western Conference, it's a gauntlet of guards, and if you can't guard up, goodbye. Like it's very
yeah,
simple. I'm sorry, but like even with Kevin Durant, even with Chris Paul, even with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton on this team, if they can't guard up, they can get got. They
yeah.
can.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is with the Phoenix Suns, you talk about their top four, right? It's
Mhm.
gonna be interesting who's gonna be that fifth guy to end games. Is it gonna be Josh Okogie? Is it gonna be a Damian Lee? Is it gonna be a Torrey Craig? There are so many guys here. I think it's gonna fluctuate to a night-to-night basis, even though the four guys, like the four stars, are basically set in stone right now. But who's gonna be able to step up? Could it be a Cameron Payne? Could it be a Terrence Ross? It's gonna change from game to game, and we just need 2 or 3 of those guys to just give them something like that's away from the top four. And I do believe that the Phoenix Suns are going to be just as dangerous, but they just need someone, someone to kind of kind of stop up those minutes and actually be like a net positive on the court.
Yeah.
But in terms of my X factor, I'm actually going to be looking at that top four, and we talked about him a bit earlier. Chris Paul. For me, Chris Paul is the biggest X factor for this team. And it's mostly because of the fact, I mean, this season, of course, hasn't been his best season. 13 points a game, 9 assists, looks solid, but his field goal percentage is down, 3-point percentage, all that good stuff. He isn't that mid-range assassin like you mentioned earlier, as he was in years past. But the top four of the Phoenix Suns is so important to them. One, to stay healthy, and two, to produce at a high level. Because I feel like every night you can get like an easy 30 from both Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. It's you need to get at least like 35 to 40 points a game from both Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton as well. You're gonna need that on a night-to-night basis. And Chris Paul, maybe it's not just scoring, but he has to be consistently finding people. He still needs to be kind of like one of the point of attack defenders like he has been in years past. We've known that he's one of the better guard defenders in the league. That he still have a little bit of that in him. He has been reliable in years past, but it feels like as he's gotten older. I mean, looking back to last season, remember when he turned 30, was it 38 years old or something like that? The minute he turned 38 years old,
37.
37.
Yeah.
The minute he turned 37 years old, everything changed in that series. I'm not saying it was like some like sort of like fairy godmother Cinderella type thing. Like once it hit midnight, everything like kind of changed for Chris Paul. But it felt like that last year in the Western Conference playoffs. And for this year, you're going to need something more reliable from him. It seems like he's not injured right now, which is a positive. But you know those injury issues are going to be creeping up in terms of, and we know that in terms of Chris Paul's career, they come at the most unfortunate time. So it's key for him to stay healthy, and it's key for him to be maybe not the Chris Paul we've seen from like the last couple of years, because that might be a bit too much to ask. But you need a reliable force. You need someone to give you still like the 14 and 10 that he has given, at least like a good 70 to 80% of what he has given you from years past.
Yeah, and TV, I think the biggest thing that worries me about Chris Paul, there's two things that really stand out about Chris Paul this season that I think are really important when you talk about the postseason. The first thing is the dude is at an all-time low in terms of his usage percentage this year. 19.2% is his usage percentage. That's easily the lowest of his career. The next lowest was 19.7. That was last season.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, the next lowest after that is 21.1. That was his last year in New Orleans.
Yeah.
That's how significant that is. And like let's not gas it. Chris Paul has never been a guy that's had significantly crazy Luka Doncic, Steph Curry level usage, right? Like the highest he's ever had in his career is 27.1. That was his last year with the Clippers, or his second to last year with the Clippers, excuse me. So he's never had insane usage. But this is a season where if you watch the games, the usage percentage is also a bit reflective of almost how passive as an offensive threat he's been this year. Almost as if he tried to hand the keys even more over to Devin Booker. And Devin Booker at least has been able to do that. But in a postseason setting where I'm able to game for you 5 to 7 games throughout a series, if you're not going to be aggressive offensive threat at that guard position, you can get had, and we're going to take you as a little bit of a chopped asset. And then on the flip side, defensively, I think Chris Paul has the notoriety as an elite level defender on the outside, right?
Yeah.
But I don't guys are afraid to test Chris Paul's gangster this season.
No, not at all.
That's something else that really stood out to me is that if you watch the games, it used to be one of those things where based off just his prowess and his mystique alone as a perimeter defender, a lot of guys would not go and hunt Chris Paul. This season, guys are looking for Chris Paul. They are trying to seek him out and attack him on the offensive end. And I think that stands out even more because if he's going to be passive offensively and he's going to be somebody that can be picked on defensively, well, TV, I don't know about you, but in the NBA world, we call that a liability. Yeah. And if Chris Paul's going to be considered as a liability, as arguably their third best player on the team, that's not great considering the fact that, yes, they have the offensive talent of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, but there's a lot of wing play out in the West as well that if those two guys aren't hitting on all cylinders, they have to be able to have a third guy. And if DA is that dude, it might give you a series, but is it going to get you to the chip?
Yeah, 100%. And like we talked about when we talked about previous teams, the guards in the West are just nuts. They're just absolutely nuts, like going from like top to bottom. And honestly, they're lucky they're not facing like a De'Aaron Fox type guy in the first round. Because if De'Aaron Fox versus Chris Paul, that's going to be like all day. That's all day going to De'Aaron each and every time. But they might be able to get away with it in the first round when you have to deal with either like a Westbrook, a Terrence Mann, something like that. They might be able to get away with it and like in the first round. But as you progress further, when you potentially go up against a team like a Denver Nuggets where they have a Jamal Murray who can like absolutely cook in the playoffs, or against a John Morant. Those are the guys that you're gonna have to worry about, and that's something for later on down the line. But first round, I think they should be okay. But it's gonna be interesting to see how Chris Paul is gonna be able to hold up, not only like on the court, but like if his body can hold up. Let's see if that's gonna be able to happen. Moving on to number 3. Oh boy, the most talked about team, the team with the most vibes in the league right now, the Sacramento Kings. Jay, this team has been so fun to watch, but man, who is their biggest X factor? First time back in the playoffs, probably in like what, 16, 17 years. I feel happy about this team.
Yeah, man, this is just a great story. And I mean, anybody who follows me on TikTok knows I've been hype about the Kings since before the season started. From the minute that they made the trade to acquire Kevin Huerter and I saw that they signed Malik Monk, I said, wait a minute, they're cooking with grease. Then they grab Mike Brown at coach and you say, okay, he's been under the Warriors umbrella as a defensive coach for them. Granted, defense hasn't been their calling card this year, talking about the Sacramento Kings. But there is a lot of offensive ingenuity that has been installed in this team. And the most important thing is Mike Brown is letting these guys rock and they're enjoying themselves in the meantime as they go about this. And so with that being the case, it's so weird to have to pick any individual guy because a lot of these guys either have not seen the postseason or have just not had the amount of success you would like for a team that's the 3rd seed in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
But I think with that being the case, bro, my X factor is Domas. And I think the reason why he's my X factor is because we've seen Domas in the playoffs with the Indiana Pacers. We see that he can carry a team or at least be a big-time contributor for a team in the regular season, carry you to a, ironically, top 4 seed, right? Same thing with Indiana. Their favorite spot was the 4 seed. In this case, the Sacramento Kings are 3rd, definitely overachieving. But here's my question. Domas has been a big-time catalyst for one of the greatest offenses of all time. But you know the saying, TV. The playoffs, the game slows down. It gets a little bit more physical. You don't get the calls you do before.
Yeah.
How does a guy like Domas anchor down a team like this and allow them to still play as free and as fast and as together as they played all season under these new parameters? That's my big question, because I think Sacramento is better built around Domantas Sabonis than the Indiana Pacers teams of the past. But the question is, right, cap or no cap, is Domas that guy in terms of being able to lead an all-time offense when now all the chips are at the middle of the table? Because over the course of an 82-game regular season, we see he can kill the game. But hey, we saw that the Utah Jazz could dominate on offense and on defense during a regular season as well. And that didn't get them too far. Similar question could be asked about the Sacramento Kings. And I know they're playing with house money, but people are still looking at that Tyrese Halliburton trade and having their questions, despite the fact that Domantas Sabonis is the hub of arguably one of the most exciting teams we've seen in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I think you talked about it there. Domas is very finesse. He is a very finesse type of player, as like many of like basically this entire Kings team. I mean, my concern for them, and I think like you kind of like mentioned it, like when it comes to like off-season, like regular season compared to postseason, it's called a different game. It's a different game in the playoffs in terms of the toughness, the chippiness, and all that. Is there someone on the Kings that can like match the chippiness? We don't know that yet. We're not sure.
Great point.
Yeah, and like Sabonis feels like he should be the guy. He is the biggest guy on the team. He feels like he's the one who's going to be like banging down low with some of the bigs out there in the West. Arguably like one of the better like West like compared to Jokic, probably like the best passing big man in the league right now. But is this team kind of like too finesse to kind of like deal with kind of the toughness for the rest of the league, for the rest of the West especially? I'm not sure, and I think like the way that they're playing, yes, it's fun for the regular season, and like you mentioned, I think a great comparison is the Jazz, who were always great on both sides of the floor when they had Mitchell and Gobert over the past couple of years. But did that translate to the playoffs? No. And I think like for a team who hasn't had many, like who hasn't had much playoff experience here, except for maybe Harrison Barnes. Besides that,
Kevin Huerter a little bit, but
Kevin Huerter, a little bit. I mean, besides that, there's not really much like playoff experience here. So it is someone. So looking to someone like Domantas Sabonis, who like you said, is kind of the catalyst for all things like on that all-time great offense. It's something to definitely look at. It's hard to have expectations for really anyone on the team, like you mentioned, because they just don't have like much playoff experience. But the one guy I think at least has an X factor for me, and see if how he's going to be able to play under pressure. Keegan Murray. Keegan Murray is someone I was looking at just because he's a rookie this season. He's probably going to be an like a top 5 and rookie of the year candidate. He's going to be like an all rookie first team type player. Is he like, can he be able to play some meaningful minutes on a playoff team, a team with home court advantage? That is a big test for a rookie who has been pretty solid for them this year, especially from the 3-point line. Over 40% from 3, very, very solid there. But is he going to be able to close games? Is he going to be able to be kind of at least a bigger, like a decent perimeter body to help defend the other guys? Because let's be honest, their guard rotation, besides maybe Davion Mitchell, who hasn't got as much playing time as I expected this year, they're going to be giving up a lot of points, whether it's De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, Kevin Huerter. They're not known for their defensive prowess. So they're going to need some guys out there in the perimeter, some guys like a few bigger bodies, players such as Harrison Barnes and Keegan Murray. Are they going to be able to stay on the court? Who knows? Because this guy right now, I think he's like 4th in like minutes per game. We don't know. Like some rookies like, play extremely well in the playoffs, a la Donovan Mitchell back in the day when he was like a rookie with the Utah Jazz. But some rookies, especially like coming into their first playoffs, it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to be able to perform. But like you mentioned, it's really hard to pick someone here, especially because there's like not really a lot of pressure on this Kings team to go extremely far. But I'm just interested to see how Keegan Murray is going to fare as a rookie going into this playoffs.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing too, and that's the interesting thing about playing with house money is there's a lot of questions around the idea of what's real and what's not, right? Keegan Murray, Harrison Barnes, Kevin Huerter, been hitting the 3 ball at a high clip all season long, right? But is that sustainable? Is the speed they've been playing with sustainable? Here's a bigger question that everybody's asking. Is this clutch gene that De'Aaron Fox has developed this season, is that translatable to a postseason setting? Because that alone could be its own X factor, because if De'Aaron Fox can be this clutch performer that we've seen throughout the entirety of this regular season, he could be a serious difference maker in terms of being able to close out games and close out series in this postseason. Because I'm going to be real, TV, I don't think we can take anything at face value going into this postseason for any team, specifically in the Western Conference, because we mentioned it with Dallas before. 2 of the better fourth quarter scorers in the NBA are both on the same team in the Dallas Mavericks. And their first initial couple of games, what was their biggest issue? I understand continuities, but their biggest issue from the day they got both linked up together, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, was they struggled to close in the fourth quarter, right?
Yeah.
And so despite the fact that the regular season displays to us that De'Aaron Fox might be this elite game closer, until we see it in a postseason setting, we have to ask ourselves, is that just for show, or is this something that he can be able to produce on a night-to-night basis with the lights being as bright as they're going to be? And the other thing, too, is with them playing with house money, TV, I'm going to pose it to you as a question, but I feel like I've been hearing this on podcasts day in and day out, and I feel like people are coming on the train now. I think at first there was this weird clamoring where people were saying, oh, all right, we're going to hunt out the 6th seed because whoever gets the Kings is going to the second round. I think that's cap, bro. I think anybody who's playing to see the Kings is about to go home. Now, maybe that's a bold prediction on my part, and I know we'll probably end up having a bold prediction episode for the podcast later on, so I won't use too much of the heat at this moment. But one thing that I think we really might need to consider is like, bro, if this version of the Kings translates to the postseason and they rock out the way they've been rocking, why should we just believe that because they're not seasoned veterans in terms of the postseason, that they're just an easy out? Why should we believe that?
Yeah, like you mentioned, we're going to have some playoff predictions episodes coming on in the future, so we're definitely going to get into that. But I will say this, nothing is more dangerous in a team than a team with nothing to lose.
Oh,
nothing is more dangerous.
You're not kidding.
Exactly, and I think that's a good way to kind of transition off the Kings. That's just something like if you have a team that you're going up against, man, you have a lot more pressure on you because a lot of the teams that they're going to be able to face, they're the ones who have made the moves who expect it to be going far to be a top seed in the West. The Kings, man, they're just happy to be here. They're just happy to be here. Moving on to the top two teams in the West now. We are moving on to number 2, which is currently the Memphis Grizzlies. Jay, your biggest X factor for this team?
Steven Adams, bro. Steven Adams.
Is he going to play, though? I don't know. Is he playing?
That's the question, gang.
Okay.
That's the question. If Steven Adams doesn't play, the Grizzlies are on upset alert. That's how I feel, man.
Yeah.
Because this defense is just not the same. This defense is just not the same without Steven Adams there. I understand that Jaren Jackson Jr. is somewhere in the DPOY conversation, whether you have him as number 1 or you have him as the second guy behind Brook Lopez. That's a conversation for a different day. But I think when you look at this team and how they've been without Steven Adams on the floor, they just look much more vulnerable on the interior. And this is a dude, I mean, he's just been insane, bro. Like from a defensive standpoint. I'm sure there's a bunch of statistics that make him sound like one of the more insane players in the league. But one of them that I did find specifically is that like he's one of the best offensive rebounders in the NBA. 100%. And so that's the crazy thing is, granted, I know that's not a defensive metric, but it's one of those things that in a way acts as a defensive play because you're creating another opportunity for your team and alleviating more possessions for the other team. Those secondary and tertiary opportunities for a team like this that loves to get the ball up, loves to attack the paint, and is able to really, really put pressure on the rim, by giving that team more possessions, the last thing you want to see is this Memphis Grizzly team running. You don't want to see them running at you 2 and 3, 4 straight possessions, under one shot clock. You know what I mean? So that's one of those things where I think Steven Adams, he matters so much to them on a possession-to-possession basis. His burly body is one of those things that makes it where Ja Morant is able to operate in the pick and roll with so much fluidity because running through a Steven Adams screen is the streets say it's not the most favorable thing you can do in the NBA, right? So that's the thing, man. I know that he doesn't pop as a player for this team, but his lack of presence throughout this injury that he sustained, it's been felt. We're not talking about it as much because the Ja Morant stuff, the Dillon Brooks stuff, the Jaren Jackson EPOY stuff. But if you just pay attention to this team, Steven Adams means a ton to them, and it is being felt regardless of the fact that he's not the biggest name on this squad.
Yeah, I mean, he fits the perfect cliche. There's just some players that just who do things that are just not on the stat sheet, and Steven Adams does that on a night-to-night basis. Because not only is he like their most important rebounder, like they don't have any really other elite rebounders on the team besides Steven Adams, but his big body is able to occupy like space, which allows Jaren Jackson to roam and be that like the best shot blocker in the league type of thing. He allows him to like the off-ball screens. He's one of the best screeners in the league. Again, the extra offensive possessions through his offensive rebounding. He does so many things on the court that just go unnoticed, but he is one of their most important players. And although he's out for the rest of the regular season, hopefully he'll be healthy enough for the playoffs. Because not only is he missing right now, Brandon Clark's missing, and he again an energy guy coming off the bench, one of their like solid guys coming off the bench over the last couple of years. He's gonna be truly missed. So that means more minutes for Steven Adams, and you need him on the court in order for this team to reach their full potential. But in terms of my X factor, probably the most erratic guy on this team in general. You mentioned him quickly, Dillon Brooks. Dillon Brooks is gonna be my X factor because we've seen in games, not only like last season, but in the playing games in the past, he can either shoot you into a game or shoot you out of it. Dillon Brooks, I don't know what's about him. I don't know if you can relate to this, but he feels like he thinks he has the Kobe Bryant green light. He feels like he has that every time he touches the ball, even though he's not him, but he'll keep shooting it. In terms of confidence, you're not worried about that with Dillon Brooks. It's just whether he's going to hit him on like a night-to-night basis. Are we going to get a good Dillon Brooks? Because let's be honest, in terms of perimeter defense, he is their most important guy. He's the ones who's not afraid to take Steph Curry 94 feet, like the entire 94 feet. He's the guy who'll take on the best offensive perimeter player every single time. But the fouls have been a problem in past years because he's just been too aggressive, and his erratic shot taking at kind of the worst moments of the game. But we've seen in games too, he can hit like 30 plus a game and completely turn a series around. We've seen what Dillon Brooks bad, and we also seen Dillon Brooks good. We need to see more Dillon Brooks good if they want to have a deep playoff run, and especially now with like the status of Steven Adams up in the air for the beginning of the playoffs, the perimeter deep defenders are going to be more important now than ever to kind of keep these guys away from the paint. Dillon Brooks is going to be one of those guys who are going to play heavy minutes for the Memphis Grizzlies in order for them to be able to play at a high defensive level. Just hope he just doesn't shoot you out of a game, because there'll be times where Dillon Brooks will go 6 for 10 from threes, and you're like, wow, this guy can really like provide something on the offensive end. But then the next game he'll give you 1 for 12. I've seen Dillon Brooks games where he goes 1 for 12 too. So I think that he's someone not only is a big X factor, but he's like the biggest like exploding factor on that team, whether they get into a big hole or they're able to like really go like to really like make a stamp on like a series.
Yeah, and I think the funny part about it is Dillon Brooks is kind of exactly the player they do need, right? His ability to guard on the perimeter is huge because they do need that physicality out there. The other thing is they don't have a true gunner, right? Like this is one of those teams that outside of Dillon Brooks, they don't have a guy that like you can say like, okay, you're gonna be our guy that like when you step out, we want you to shoot. We want you to jack shots. Like we want you to legitimately make sure that you are consistently an offensive threat. I think they want guys like Desmond Bane to be more like that. I think Ja Morant already has high volume as it is, but Ja Morant's play style is more about his effectiveness putting pressure on the rim.
Yeah.
And Desmond Bane is an efficient 3-point shooter. But I still feel as though I wouldn't consider him as like a gunner. I think Dillon Brooks is that one guy that in a weird way offensively gives them the juice, because he's the guy that you kind of said, like, it's the never say die attitude of this idea of like we've got to put the ball in the basket. So I'm going to be the guy to make sure that you guys see that like, yo, we got to start clicking offensively. And he kind of, his shot, the weird part is that his shot chart makes it seem like if he were just to knock them down, he'd be a much more effective player.
Yeah.
The context behind his shot chart says, but when did he take them and why did it happen? And that's the real conundrum with Dillon Brooks, because I think the shot chart will indicate that like, yo, Dillon Brooks actually is like an efficient shot taker in the sense of what he's trying to be the catalyst of offensively, trying to give this team more scoring juice. Because you look at it, Jaren Jackson Jr. is not an insane offensive threat. We know Steven Adams does most of his damage off of dump-offs and putbacks. Desmond Bane is a big-time three-point shooter, and Ja Morant, like I said, puts most of his pressure on the rim. So the question is, who's that one guy that just says, bump it, I'm going to go make mine by any means? He's kind of that dude. So it's weird because they need that, but they end up getting it at sometimes the wrong times. And that is, I feel like we're talking about Russ. Is that weird? Is that weird? Like it feels like we're talking about Russell Westbrook, yet we're talking about Dillon Brooks. And I think that's kind of the worry. That is kind of the worry when you talk about X factors, is that implosion that you mentioned beforehand. When you talk about Russell Westbrook, when you talk about Dillon Brooks, and that impact of if they're good, then they're really good. And this could mean that we could get some of these teams up out of here in 5 games. But if their lack of awareness kicks in and it really lingers, this could be a 7-game series that we might be staring at the last 2 minutes and saying, dang, we wish XYZ would have happened differently because bro made bad decisions and it cost us games.
It's the whole irrational confidence thing. It's just the irrational. It's like you see like like the bucket guys in the league, like the Jordan Clarksons, the Malik Monks. They have at least like a track record to be able to like attempt all those shots and like have the confidence to make them. Dillon Brooks takes the same amount of shots. The conversion rate, on the other hand, is a bit of a different story. But that's just. But I guess like you need this. The Grizzlies need that sort of player. But you would rather it be someone else. That's all I'm saying. But Dillon Brooks, we've seen Dillon Brooks have some big games in the playoffs. We just need more of those, and less than like the 2 for 12 and stuff like that. But it's going to be interesting to see if the Memphis Grizzlies do go far, and if Dillon Brooks' play, it does correlate with that. Final team though, the Denver Nuggets, number 1 in the West by a large margin. Jay, who was your biggest X factor for this team?
KCP, bro. I wanted it to be MPJ, but I think MPJ has showed me a little something, something. And I think if he can take that into the postseason, I'm not worried about him. Jamal makes me a little worried, but I think he's been steady enough to the point that Jokic can kind of like keep that whole thing at bay. And I still think that Jamal Murray has the gene that says in a big series, he's going to be able to play up to the competition. KCP had one of the all-time postseasons as a role player in that 2020 bubble, and I think that that's big time because it wasn't just the insane three-point shooting that he was able to contribute for that Lakers team. It was the fact that defensively he was huge on the perimeter for that team. And again, this is not a great defensive personnel team, especially on the perimeter. Aaron Gordon is probably their best defender from a switchability standpoint, and I love Bruce Brown. But KCP is going to be the guy. TV, what's been one of the bigger things we've noted throughout this entire podcast? The West got guards. So yeah. If the West got guards, we need guys that's going to be able to guard those dudes at a high level. KCP is going to be Denver's quote-unquote stopper. And I think the fact that he's a guy that doesn't necessarily have to be a net negative defensively is also a big thing as well. One of the bigger things that was notable about last postseason when they went up against the Warriors was I don't think they had anybody who could really compete in the backcourt. Now, obviously, you could say Jamal Murray didn't play, so that's part of it. Of course. But I think defensively, they weren't able to make up for the fact that offensively they couldn't match. Defensively, they weren't able to make up for that. KCP is way bigger in terms of what he's able to provide than a guy like Will Barton, who was on the team last year, right? I think that KCP is more important on this team, on this version of the team, than Will Barton and Monte Morris combined for last year's team.
Yeah.
Now, pair that with Jamal Murray being back. Now we have a backcourt that can truly compete in the Western Conference. So I think that he's got to hold up his end in order for them to really be able to do what they need to do in a West that, like I said, they got guards, bro. And it's going to be hard no matter what series you go in terms of the backcourt.
Yeah, it's especially especially with the lack of defense that Denver has kind of like throughout their roster. You need someone to be kind of like that reliable guy in the perimeter. KCP could be and has to be that guy. And he also has to hit down shots. I mean, if you look at his percentages this season, 47, 42, and 82, they need that. They need that going into the playoffs. When he's open, he has to be able to hit those shots. And he's shown to do it in the past. And that's the reason why they were able to be comfortable to trade away Will Barton and Monte Morris to the Wizards in order to acquire KCP. That's the reason why they wanted to make that trade. He's proving to pay them dividends so far, but is he going to be able to continue to do it throughout the playoffs? We'll have to wait and see. My pick for X Factor kind of is around the same ballpark as you. I'm going to go with Bruce Brown. I'm going to go Bruce Brown as my X Factor. And mostly because if you remember his time on the Brooklyn Nets, his defensive versatility was a massive reason why they were able to be in a lot of games. Because even though this man is a 6'4" guard, he can guard like power forwards. Because of that,
right?
He could defend power forwards. Like he has like a bulky body. He can switch. Like the switch ability. Like I swear, remind me if I'm wrong, but he was playing like sometimes like power forward or like small ball 5 at times for the Brooklyn Nets last season. He played
small ball 5 for that Brooklyn team for a good amount of the thing. The thing is, he's a guy that Bruce Brown, he's like one of those weird players, man. Like same thing with Gary Payton II, right? Yeah. One of those things where offensively he's a 4, but defensively he can be whatever you want him to be. You know what
exactly.
I mean? He can just be wherever you kind of need him to be because the pressure he puts on the ball makes up for the lack of size that he provides, or I guess that he doesn't provide.
Exactly, because I think there's going to be times in these playoffs where the defensive, like especially with Michael Porter Jr., I feel like sometimes there's going to be times in the playoffs where Michael Porter Jr. is just not going to shoot the ball well, and he's such a net negative on the defensive end. You could see games ending where there's no Michael Porter Jr. on the court, and Bruce Brown is going to be there picking up the best wing or the best guard, 94 feet, and that's going to be so important for this Denver Nuggets team because a lot of teams want to funnel like players to the inside and let their center be the last line of defense. You don't want Jokic to be the last line of defense. I'll tell you that much. Bruce Brown is going to have to do a shift and a half. Him, KCP, and Aaron Gordon are going to have to do a shift and a half in terms of covering up for the lack of interior defense. So someone like Bruce Brown, who we know can like develop, like who can like provide on the defensive end, but he's also shown in times where he can like hit like 10 straight points, hitting some threes. Like I swear there's like he has like that patent floater where he just gets to the middle of the lane and just like hits that floater like every single time. He would hit it like 3 or 4 times in a row. We need those sort of performances from they need some of those performances from Bruce Brown throughout the playoffs, because let's be honest, the Denver Nuggets, they are not the greatest defensive team in the world. I mean, they're right in the middle of the pack, and I think that there's going to be times where you look at some of the star players in terms of like when you look at the top 3 star players in Jokic, Murray, and MPJ, all of them not being the best on the defensive end, you're going to need your role players a la KCP and Bruce Brown to really make their mark on the game. And I think Bruce Brown's ability to switch up defensively, basically on any position, someone who's able to hit shots when asked, like especially as an off-ball player, he's been able to show that this year. He's going to need to bring over that intensity to the playoffs, because there are going to be times where the Nuggets are going to get exposed defensively, and that's what the playoffs do to you. They're going to expose your defensive struggles. Bruce Brown's going to have to make up for a lot of that. I think that's why he is going to be my X factor.
Yeah, I think just to kind of put a ribbon on it, bro, I think the most interesting part about this team is just the fact that you checked every box now, right? The last 2 seasons has been the exact opposite. But this season, you've checked every box. Jokic is in the top 2 in terms of MVP again. Your team is number 1 in the Western Conference, and they're firmly there. So they're going to have home court advantage throughout the entirety of the postseason as far as they go. You have your other 2 guys in Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. You have a guy in Aaron Gordon who's having his best year of his career. You have a guy in KCP who's arguably having one of the best years of his career. Christian Brown has been very productive for them in the limited minutes that he's had. This team has a lot more versatility now with guys like KCP and like Bruce Brown, like you mentioned beforehand. It feels like the formula for a team that should be dangerous enough to really make a run. And it also feels like a team that most people are not going to give excuses if they don't. So the question now is, like, can you get it done? I mean, it seems so broad. And it's like, duh, you could say that about a bunch of teams that have MVP caliber players. But for Denver, we've been able to give them excuse after excuse. And remember, they were just like the little that could team a couple years ago that just barely lost in that Minnesota game that felt like a play-in game, right?
Yeah.
To get into the postseason a couple years ago. And now they've scrapped and clawed, and they've got a fringe all-star caliber guy in Jamal. They've got a big-time MVP, all-time caliber guy in Nikola Jokic. They've got a supporting cast. They've got a very, very solid coach who might be coaching for his job, considering the fact that all of the stars are aligning, right?
Yeah.
And I hate to say that about Mike Malone, but unfortunately, like if everything is aligned in terms of what's on the court in terms of the on the court product, Mike Malone is the only odd man out in terms of what they can do this offseason to get any better, just based off circumstance. So you hate to say it, but they're playing for the validity of Nikola Jokic. They're playing for the validity of all the Denver Nuggets fans that were saying, watch when we get healthy. And they're playing for their coach's job, which sounds weird for a team that's the number 1 overall seed. Now, the scary thing about that is we said that about the Bucks a couple of seasons too, and they made the play.
Yeah, for sure. So
hey, maybe that's good for them. Maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, that is definitely. I mean, like a lot of the things kind of line up with that. I mean, the coach Budenholzer back in the day was like on the hot seat because he wasn't able to get over the hump. Same thing with Mike Malone here. The 2-time MVP who couldn't get over the hump, Giannis, Nikola Jokic. Right. Now they've made the changes. Now they have like all the guys healthy. No excuses now. Let's see if they're able to do it, because it seems like, again, on paper, they feel like they should be able to go all the way. They should be the clear favorite in the West. But there's still that question mark just because we just don't know what this fully healthy team is going to look like in the playoffs. And with all the other teams like kind of like creeping down, like trying to creep up and looking at a Denver Nuggets team, it's kind of like, you know what, this is a team that looks beatable. They don't look unstoppable. That's something to definitely look out for. And I think I do have a lot of faith in this Denver Nuggets team, but there's definitely going to be a big microscope under them for how good their postseason run's going to be. But yeah, those are our X factors for each of the top 6 in the West. Let us know down below if we're missing anyone, and if you have like any other different X factors that we haven't that we didn't mention earlier. Now we're moving on to the next section of the podcast, and it is the draft. And for this episode, I'm going to throw it over to Jay. We have a very interesting draft here that we're going to go to, but I'm going to throw it over to Jay. Explain what our draft is today.
Yeah, man. So this one's a little unique because we're usually the types to kind of rely on our own little ingenuity to build our drafts over the last couple of episodes. But this time we're gonna use a little bit of outside sourcing. So remember your citations, kids. That's how I'm gonna put that. But today we're gonna be going to CBSSports.com because they dropped the top 50 players list of the 2022-2023 season. Now, granted, this was back in late February, so it's been about a month. Things could be a little bit different, but I'm not going to lie. Their top 50, kind of solid considering the circumstances, especially with a ton of the injuries that we've seen throughout the season. But with that being the case, and we'll have the link in the description for you guys to follow us along. But TV, today, we are going to be drafting a starting five using the CBSSports.com NBA top 50 list. But there's a little bit of a caveat because, hey, man, it'd be easy to just keep playing around in the top 10 and just have a super squad, right? Yeah. But I think the way to make this a little bit more interesting is to work our way through the list. So what we're going to do is for our starting five, we are going to draft from groups starting with 50 to 41 and work our way to the number one spot. Now, the rules for this are very simple. From each grouping, there's 5 groupings, obviously, between 50 and number one. Each of us, being me and TV, are going to draft from those groups. But the rule is you have to do it in the order that we're working down the list. Not only does it make it a little bit easier for us to draft throughout, but it also makes it easier for you guys to follow along because we're literally going to just be going through the article from top to bottom. So TV.
Yeah.
Interesting top five. Interesting way to put this top 5 together, considering the fact that you got to think about fit, but it's still a lot of talent here, even for
there is a lot. There is definitely a lot of talent. And in past drafts, I think we've gone like just basically like me, Jay. You know what? Maybe let's we might switch things up now. Let's try to do it a bit serpentine. Let's go serpentine with this draft.
I like that.
Since we're going to each section anyway, we're gonna have a chance to at least get like first or second in multiple of these sections. So we'll do it serpentine. But as we do with these drafts, Jay, you got the first overall pick. So the way it's gonna go, Jay's gonna get the first pick out of the 50 to 41. I get the second pick, but I get the first pick of the 40 to 31. And as go forward, we're gonna just switch it up like that as serpentine goes. But Jay, you got the first pick, man. Who are you gonna pick from this section of players?
Yes, sir. So just some notable names within that 50 to 41, just so people kind of can envision it. Zach LaVine, Brandon Ingram, Bradley Beal. Interesting group to start with, considering. Yeah. And come on, TV. This is the Bulls fan in the house, man. So you already know. We're going to go to that 47 spot. We're going to go ahead and grab Zach LaVine early, get our damage out the way.
Zach LaVine is off the board. Very good choice. I mean, he hasn't had a fantastic season, but I still view him as kind of like one of those underrated players in the league right now, just because no one is really talking about him. But of course, you're the Bulls fan. You're going to be able to take your guy in Zach LaVine. Now for me, and look, I am being a little bit strategic with this because if you really think about it, a lot of the guys who are going to get near the top of the list are going to be guys that need the ball in their hands to succeed. So maybe is it smart for me to potentially go with a guy that can maybe do a bit of the dirty work, someone who doesn't need the ball at all times, someone who is an elite off the ball player here? Because there's 2 guys here that I am very interested in, and I know he's on the court. I know Brandon Ingram is on here too, but I'm not gonna go with him. I'm either going Desmond Bane or Mikal Bridges, man. I'm going Desmond Bane or Mikal Bridges, and because of the way this man's been playing so far, especially in the Brooklyn Nets jersey, give me Mikal, man. Mikal Bridges has been one of my favorite guys to watch in the league, especially ever since moving to Brooklyn. He's showing his offensive prowess, and he's still one of the league's best, and I mean one of the league's best perimeter defenders. So give me Mikal Bridges for my team, which means I get the next pick over there for the 40 to 31. Now looking through this list, again, a lot of guys here that can do a lot. I don't know if you're going to go back-to-back Bulls, actually. That's going to be very interesting if you do go back-to-back Bulls. But for me, yeah, you know what? Let's go with someone who has shown some great offensive capabilities, but again, one of the league's best perimeter defenders. We are locked down over here, but he's shown he can do well on the offensive end as well. Give me Drew Holiday.
Oh,
He was an all-star this year, but he's, again, him and Mikal Bridges manning the perimeter. Man, I don't care who you choose. That's going to be tough for your team.
Yeah, man, that's the thing. The biggest part about this group is that there's a lot of defense in this group.
Yeah, there is a lot of defense
in this group. Again, for the listeners, some notable names within this group: Evan Mobley, Brook Lopez, DG. Well, Brook Lopez falls more into the other category, but
yeah,
DG, Dejounte Murray. There's a handful of guys. I'm gonna go defense on this one. I know it'd be easy to pick my boy DeMar, who's also in this group. But I'm gonna go with Evan Mobley, man. I think he is a guy that I think should be getting more discussion in the defensive player of the year race. And I think if you had to rank guys right now,
yeah,
maybe this is early for a guy of his caliber, but I think he's been good enough to legit be considered as like the third best defensive player in this running so far this year.
potentially.
And, we definitely need rim protection behind a guy like Zach LaVine. I'm also trying to be smart here because TV. Something that I didn't mention at the top of this draft is something that's super notable about the way that we're doing this order. We're building to the superstar, not around the superstar. So the group that we draft leading up to the big man at the big man in that 1 through 10, that's gonna be the head of our stake. That guy, he's got to be able to fit into what we got going on. So if you don't got a concept in mind, it's gonna make picking your top 10 player a little hard, even if he is gonna be one of the best guys in the league, obviously.
Exactly. This is why that's why you have to be really strategic with the picks here. It's a lot. Yes, there's a lot of talent on this list, but fit is going to be absolutely important. Trying to fit everyone in this team. But Jay, you did go with Evan Mobley. Who do you got as your next pick? Because you now have the choice of 30 to 21.
Yeah, 30 to 21 is interesting too, man. Whew. All right. Anthony Edwards is a name. My boy Laurie is a name.
Ooh.
D Fox is here. But TV, there's no way I can leave out here without getting him, man. I gotta get D Book. I gotta do it now.
Oh no. Man.
I feel like I'd just be wrong if I didn't. And maybe this is too early for me to sure out the backcourt. But I got this weird feeling that with the top 10, and granted, I've not scrolled completely through this list. I will admit that, like openly, I've not scrolled completely through this list before the podcast. But I have a pretty decent feeling that like most of the top 10, or at least half the top 10, is gonna involve some pretty solid big men. So let me go ahead and get my backcourt out the way. I'm gonna go ahead and get D-Book out.
That was going to be my guy. He would fit absolutely perfectly on this team, too. Oh, man. Devin Booker's going to be my pick. But I respect it. Who do I go with for this position now? I could go really small in my backcourt if I really want to get some more offense, because if I could put Drew Holiday at the 2, that is still pretty good. I mean, some other names on this list, like you mentioned, there's a Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards, Paul George, Kyrie Irving. Very, very good choices. But I'm going to go with a guy, even though he's played minimal games this season, he has been one of the most dominant guys in the league. Give me Zion Williamson. Zion Williamson at the forward position. He's only played 29 games, but man, in those 29 games, 26 and 7. This guy was like, when he was on the court, this guy was an absolute monster. Again, injuries is the issue here for sure, but Zion Williamson, one of the most dominant guys in the league. I had to go with him in that position.
That's a good pickup, man. I'm not going to lie. Zion is one of those guys that when you look at this list, you feel like he's a little underrated. And then it's like, but availability is playing a huge factor. And that ends up playing a lot of weight. Also in whether or not he's draftable for something like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. But that is why I have him on this list. Someone who could just completely dominate the inside. I am very happy with that selection. Next pick over here, we have a lot of great players here as well. We talked about Domas being a top guy here. He is in the top 15, which is crazy. Kawhi Leonard, Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam. My boy's on this list. But there is so much talent here. I'm down to 2. I am down to 2 guys. I'm either going... This is tough. This is really tough. I think I know who you want, And I think he's like, and I can hear the sounds of a certain farm animal coming, coming through here. Do I go with it? Or do I just get myself an absolute bucket? You know what? You kind of stole me with the D book thing, but I also need a really good perimeter guy. This is a tough decision. You know what? I'm gonna go with one of the most underrated players in the league. He's having a fantastic season. I don't care. You can have your guy. Give me James Harden.
Oh
Give me
my
James Harden.
gosh, it worked. It
Give me James.
worked. It
I need some perimeter guys. James Harden for me, one of the most people have underrated him this season. Like his season so far, he's been absolutely phenomenal. But I know who you're gonna go with, and I'm letting you have him. But I'm taking James Harden.
Look, man, maybe I'm doing this for social media. Maybe I just think my guy needs some shooting to get some championships. But hey, I'm gonna go ahead and get LeBron James at 11, man. Come on, come on. It's not even because of the GOAT convo at this point. It's literally out of the fact that let's talk about the team building. First of all, let's talk about the fact that LeBron James is number 11. I think most people would feel like that's pretty egregious, but I actually think it's relatively fair when you factor that this is a top 50 list that's constructed based off the production this season, and that does include the lack of production due to injury. So LeBron James being at 11 is actually pretty respectable with the amount of games that he's missed. But I got a ton of shooting with Zach LaVine and D-Book, who can both also self-shot create for themselves. I can literally put LeBron James at the 3, despite probably be playing point guard in terms of what he does offensively. And Evan Mobley's behind him, and I feel pretty confident in that back line. And, hey, like I said, I still got some center work left in that top 10. That reminds me, I got another pick to close out this draft.
I have a feeling there's a position that we both need right now, and I think I know exactly who we're like one of. If you're gonna pick one guy, I'm gonna pick the other. That's basically all.
And you know what sucks, man? And because we're almost to the end of this, I am gonna read out the names because it's gonna be interesting to see from the comment section who they feel like we really missed out on, especially when you look at the makeup of our teams. Because like I said, we're building up to the superstar. So it's not just best player available. It's which superstar do we think genuinely fits best with the kind of roster that we've put together so far. So in the top 10, it's Ja Morant at number 10, Damian Lillard at number 9, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, my boy, at number.
Let's go.
Steph Curry at number 7. Kevin Durant at number 6, Joel Embiid at number 5. Again, this was about a month ago. Joel Embiid is probably a little bit higher in most people's lists around this time. Jason Tatum at number 4, Luka Doncic at number 3, Giannis Antetokounmpo at number 2, and Nikola Jokic at number 1. So it's interesting because you can't go wrong, TV, when you're pulling.
You cannot.
You can't go wrong, but you got to look at your team and see who makes sense. Now, here's the thing. Jay doesn't have a lot of defense on his team. I got Evan Mobley. I still think Braun can give you a good performance here and there if it's postseason time on the defensive end. You need some defense, though. And obviously, we're going big man. I snitched that a long time ago. We're going to grab a big man here. Going with Giannis, man.
Oh wow! Wow! Okay.
Yeah. See, now let me explain the logic, because again, I know this is a controversial situation. We didn't pick the leading guy for MVP in Joel Embiid, and Nikola Jokic. TV, I think we can agree for most of the season earlier on, me and you were lockstep with this idea that Nikola Jokic probably should be a 3-time MVP, man, based on the way this season is gone. But I'm just looking at my team. I've got the shooting. I've got facilitating from LeBron James. I don't need too many more guys that can pass at a high level. I don't need passivity, man. I need more bucket getting, but I also need guys that can defend the rim. I got 2 shooters. I got LeBron James to set the table, and he also can put pressure on the rim. Giannis Antetokounmpo and Evan Mobley can be a danger in the inside. There's a world where I think Nikola Jokic fits better on this team, and I'm interested to see what the comment section says, but I'm going to go with Giannis on this one. It might be Here's a question: did I pick best player available? That's an interesting question by itself. But yeah, man, I'm gonna go Giannis.
I was not expecting that. I was like, I mean, of course I knew he was an option, but I mean, I was like, I just thought like with that final position, like I'm gonna be completely frank with you. I thought you were gonna take Joel Embiid. I was so ready for you to take Joel Embiid.
I considered it, and after we finish, we typically tend to read out our picks, and then we decide, what are some things that we regret or certain guys that maybe we overlooked or just unfortunately weren't able to draft. And Joel Embiid is definitely in that grouping. I think there's a world where he fits nice on this team. But Giannis provides passing. He puts a lot of pressure on the rim alongside guys like Zach LaVine and LeBron James, so he's able to do that as well. I've got shooting around Giannis with at least two, if not three, depending on how you view LeBron James as a shooter. He's got three shooters around him. Evan Mobley is a guy who can also take guys off the dribble a little bit offensively. Yeah. There's some work there. I like what Giannis provides, and he does it in a way where I think we can still just be a very aggressive offensive team as well.
But I get it. No, I get the pick, and I like your watch behind it. But in terms of me now,
you're in a weird spot.
I'm in a weird spot. I am definitely in a weird spot. I had a guy in mind this entire draft that I was building up towards. Do I change it the last second? No, I will not. I'm going to go with Jokic. I built this team with the vision that Jokic is just going to be able to just watch from the perimeter as Zion cuts the rim, Mikal Bridges moves along the perimeter, Jrue Holiday moving around, James Harden. These guys with the defense, with the shooting, everything above, and then Jokic is just going to be able just to feed them all the time. In terms of passing, I have two of the top assist guys in the league right now, which is pretty insane. But also these guys, we know Harden's ability to score. We know that he's an elite scorer when he wants to be. And all these other guys have proven that they could be really good off the ball players and like just be able to dominate whenever possible. I mean, I was thinking of Embiid, but I was also thinking of the fact that Zion is already occupying that much space, so having him and Embiid together could be an issue. But Jokic, man, he operates on the perimeter. He can operate anywhere on the basketball court, and he is someone that Zion could really just feed off of, which is fantastic. So I'm gonna take Jokic as my center. Even though he's my center, he's acting as my pseudo point guard as well, so that's pretty cool. But he is gonna be my pick to round out this team. But like you mentioned, man, we're gonna try to let's go through both of our lineups and the teams that we got each. Jay, let's hear yours first. I guess do we go with the fit with our first pick and then down and stuff like that, I guess?
So I'm going to just read mine out in the form of the lineup that I would be running it if I were to do it for the top five, if I were to read them out for a lineup. So for my CBS Sports top 50 NBA draft, the way that my lineup is going to be constructed is Devin Booker at the 1, Zach LaVine at the 2, LeBron James at the 3, Evan Mobley at the 4, and Giannis Antetokounmpo at the 5.
That's a scary team, man. It's a scary team. My CBS top 50 starting 5 here. I got James Harden at the 1, Jrue Holiday at the 2, Mikal Bridges at the 3, Zion Williamson at the 4, and Nikola Jokic at the 5.
Oh my gosh.
Both these teams are nuts. I mean, it was going to be nuts either way, but man, these teams are looking real nice. Let us know down below what you guys think. Did we draft the teams right? Would you have drafted better? Was there a third team that you could have made with the guys that we haven't chosen that could beat our teams? Let us know down below in the comments section. Final segment of the show now. We have reached near the end, which means it is time for the weekly quiz. And I have another great one for you today, Jay. Because this past weekend, 2 players hit over 10 threes, which means that 10 players on the season have hit 10 plus threes, which is pretty crazy to think about, that 10 players this season has hit 10 or more threes in a game. And Jay, I want you to name all 10.
They're from this season?
From this season only, there are 10 different players that have hit 10 or more threes in a game. Let me hear it. I want to see if you can get all of these guys. Some of them, of course, are pretty standard, but some guys you might need to do a little bit of thinking on.
Let's see. All right. Clay.
Clay has done it 4 times this year. That's pretty nuts.
Wow.
He's done it.
Okay. Steph.
Steph, yep. He's done it once, but yeah, he's done it once.
Dame.
Dame has done it twice this year. The rest of these guys have done it once, I think, all of them, right? Yeah, all of them have done it once.
The rest of them have done it once. Okay. Oh, the Trey Murphy game.
That was one of the ones I was referencing this past weekend. Trey Murphy.
Yeah, the Trey Murphy game. That was one of those I want to make sure. Zach LaVine.
Zach LaVine has done it once this year.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
The
rest of these guys, there's a couple that it might be kind of tough to get, but a lot of these other guys are just like pure shooters. Still, that are like.
I'm gonna go with a guess. This is just a throwing it out in the water. Tyler Hero.
He is on this list. December 15th of 2022, he hit 10 threes against the Rockets.
Donovan Mitchell.
Surprisingly, he hasn't. I'm very surprised he hasn't.
Wow. Okay. But, yeah, I guess that 70 ball was pretty like mid range and rim heavy.
Yeah. He has a teammate on this though.
Oh, DG? DG did?
Yeah, Darius Garland, November 13th, 2022. He hit 10 threes in a game. You don't think of him as much of a shooter, but he's done it this year, which is pretty crazy. Three more players for you.
Long season, but didn't like Sadiq Bey like snap earlier this year?
No, that was end of last year.
That was last season. Dang, I remember that game like low key vividly because that was crazy.
Two of these guys are like, I would say like starter level players, and one is the bench guy who just completely popped off. It was one of the guys from this weekend who just completely popped off out of nowhere.
Okay. Malik Beasley?
Malik Beasley, no. This guy was traded from the LA Clippers, one of the many players that they traded, and he ended up on the Memphis Grizzlies.
Oh, Luke Kennard. That feels like a safe guess, but at the same time, it's like, dang, Luke getting 10 of them jumps up is crazy, let alone making 10 of them things.
Yeah, no, that game was crazy. I was watching the highlights. He started off the game 10 for 10 from 3. 10 for 10. And quick comment, the Rockets are here on this list 6 times. So if you're facing the Rockets, you're Jesus Christ.
Sounds like you're going to have a good night, basically.
You're going to have a great night.
Oh, man.
Yeah, you're missing 2 more guys. Both of these guys, I would say, one guy is a very good shooter. His jumper says otherwise.
Wow. Okay, that's an okay. Huh.
He's a very good shooter. He's just winning. Like if you watched him, if you had no idea if you're watching basketball and you saw the way this man was shooting, you would not think he's an elite 3-point shooter, but he is.
Wow. Okay, that's an interesting hint.
And then the other guy, yeah, he's just known for getting buckets. He like 2 of his star players were injured a lot this year, so he had to do a lot of the heavy lifting. In terms of like his play, he plays in the Western Conference. A team who's in the play-in right now, like in the play-in mix in the West.
Okay, for anybody who's watching the video version of this, which probably aren't, but like in terms of like watching me specifically, I'm just looking at teams. I'm not gonna cheat.
Yeah, no, I trust you. No, you're good.
Okay, I know you said Western Conference, but did Bojan hit 10 threes?
No, he did not.
No?
Are both of these guys West? No, there's one East guy, one West guy. One was an All-Star, one is like a borderline All-Star every year.
When was an All-Star? Okay, wait a minute.
The guy in the East was an All-Star. The guy in the West is like a borderline All-Star every year.
Oh, crap.
And he's in one of the play-in teams. He could shoot the lights out at any point. He absolutely like, and I think like not for his current team right now, but for his previous team, like he like completely went off against like Denver in like a second round series to completely like save his team to go to the Western Conference Finals.
Holy cow! Wait a minute, I'm drawing a blank. In the play-in in the Western Conference,
two of the top guys were injured. One of them is back now, but 2 of the top guys have been basically injured for like more than half the season.
I'm not gonna lie, bro. I'm legit drawing a blank. I don't know who these people could be.
It's a,
What's the Eastern Conference hit again?
it's an Eastern Conference. He's a first-time All-Star, and again, he's a very good player. He's probably not known for his shooting as much. He's more known for his passing for sure.
Oh crap, Julius Randle?
No, this
No?
guy's most known for his passing. He's a first-time All-Star.
Oh, what the heck?
He's one of the best passers in the league, but this guy hit 10 threes right before Christmas.
What the heck?
His team was in the play-in mix for a while, but his team has kind of like slipped out now. They probably don't have a chance anymore. One of the more surprising teams for sure in terms of like how good they were. We didn't think they were going to be that good.
Laurie?
No, I'm talking about the East team. Like it's kind of like the Jazz of the East. The Jazz of the East were they weren't expected. They were expected to be one of the bottom teams, but they surprised a lot of people. They were in the play-in mix for a long time. And this guy,
Tyrese Halliburton hit 10 threes. Are we serious?
Yeah, he had 10 threes in a game against the Miami Heat December 23.
Nobody in the comment section called me a casual. I genuinely Tyrese Halliburton, wow.
Yeah.
My Indiana Pacers on, I guess. The dude missed so much time that I kind of turned off of Indiana after he got injured, and then comes back and they're not trying to be competitive anymore, really.
Yeah, and now you're missing one guy in the West. He's basically he's more known for his previous team. He was he was really good on the Portland Trailblazers, borderline All-Star every year. Got moved to this team and had to take on a bigger role because of injuries, but yeah.
Oh, CJ
McCollum.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I feel like CJ's had a quiet season.
Yeah, he's had a pretty solid year, and that's mostly because Brandon Ingram and Zion has missed so much time, but he had to do a lot of the heavy lifting. But yeah, CJ McCollum hit 10 threes in a game this season. And yeah, the fact that 10 of them did, and 2 of them happened this past weekend, absolutely crazy. Shout out to Trey Murphy and Luke Kennard for getting it done this weekend. But yeah, guys, if there's any other quizzes you want us to do, any other quiz ideas, let us know down below in the comment section below. But Jay, we have reached end of another classic episode, man. That was another great episode. Before we head out, do you have anything to say to these beautiful people?
Yeah, man. This season is it's just been so insane. And the Western Conference section is kind of an encapsulation of just what we're going into for this postseason. Because I think all year the word parity has been thrown out there. But I feel like it's taken until we get closer to this area now where the play-in tournament is so volatile that I think we're genuinely due for one of the greatest postseason runs of NBA history. I think this could legitimately be considered as the first real March Madness of NBA in a while, in terms of just going into the playoffs saying, wow, I really don't know who could win. You might feel confident in the Bucks, you might feel confident in 76ers, you might like what Jokic and Denver is doing, but can you really put your eggs into any basket? We don't know if Kevin Durant's going to be fully healthy by the time the postseason comes. Granted, we know he's going to be playing in the next, I think, literally in the next upcoming game. Yeah. But what's he going to look like after hurting himself again? There's a whole bunch of different questions around the league, and I think that just prepares us for a really crazy postseason, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in the Western Conference, where honestly you can make some of the arguments that some of the teams in the play-in too. If things fall right, things could there's a pathway for some of these teams that can go to the finals, even if they're in the play-in tournament. So it's going to be an absolutely crazy playoffs. Come along, watch the Hit Your Free Throws podcast every single week to join us for this ride. And of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the notification bell, sub and do whatever you can with the podcast networks, and follow us at Hit Your Free Throws, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. And also our personal socials can be found down below. But yeah, another great episode. Thank you guys for watching and listening. This is TV signing out along with my co-host Jay. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Peace.
Peace.